They chose the wrong target the moment they decided to follow her, but they didn't know that yet. From their point of view, it looked simple. A quiet neighborhood, streetlights spaced too far apart, houses closed up for the night. No witnesses, no noise. Just one woman walking with steady steps, hands free, head forward, not rushing, not looking over her shoulder. To them, that calm read as weakness. They mistook confidence for distraction, control for vulnerability. They had done this kind of thing before, or at least thought they had. Patterns made them lazy. Assumptions made them bold. What they failed to notice were the details that mattered. The way she kept her shoulders loose, not tense. The way her pace never changed, even when footsteps fell into rhythm behind her. The way her breathing stayed slow and measured. She wasn't unaware. She was aware of everything. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in air as someone moved too close. She had already clocked their positions, distances, angles. Years of training had wired her brain to read danger the way other people read traffic lights. Red, yellow, green. Act, wait, move. They whispered to each other, confident enough to be careless. One drifted to her left, another lagged behind, thinking he was invisible. They thought they were surrounding her. In reality, they were placing themselves exactly where she wanted them. She didn't look at them because she didn't need to. Peripheral vision was enough. Reflections in car windows filled in the rest. Her hands stayed relaxed, fingers slightly curled, ready. Not clenched, not shaking. Ready. The wrong target isn't just about skill. It's about mindset. They were hunting. She was assessing. They were driven by impulse. She was governed by discipline. They believed numbers gave them power. She knew numbers create chaos when the wrong people rely on them. She had been trained to function when outnumbered, outmatched, cut off. Darkness didn't scare her. Confined spaces didn't scare her. Uncertainty didn't scare her. She had lived inside all of it and learned how to move through it without hesitation. They closed in, heartbeats loud in their ears, adrenaline making them sloppy. One reached out, fingers grazing fabric, already imagining control. That was the moment it became irreversible. She had given them space. She had given them time. Every step they took closer was a choice they made on their own. In her mind, the situation narrowed to simple options. De-escalation had passed. Escape routes were noted. Threat levels confirmed. The switch flipped, quiet and internal. They still thought she was behind the moment. They thought fear would come next. A scream, a stumble, a plea. Instead, what came was precision. Not rushed. Not wild. Calculated down to muscle memory. She didn't fight like someone trying to survive. She moved like someone executing a sequence she had practiced thousands of times. Each motion had purpose. Each strike had intent. No wasted energy. No hesitation. The first one never understood what happened. Pain arrived before awareness. Balance disappeared before thought. The second tried to react and found his body no longer responding the way he expected. The third realized too late that they had misread everything. The calm, the silence, the lack of fear. It wasn't submission. It was restraint. They had chosen her because they thought she was alone. They thought isolation meant weakness. They didn't see the years behind her eyes. The training fields, the cold mornings, the drills that stripped hesitation out of the body, the lessons that taught when to hold back and when to end a threat fast. She had been alone in worse places than this, with higher stakes than bruises and broken bones. This street didn't intimidate her. It simplified things. Their mistake wasn't underestimating her strength. It was underestimating her preparation. Strength fades. Preparation compounds. By the time panic finally reached them, it was already too late to change the outcome. She was no longer reacting to them. They were reacting to her movements, one step behind, trying to catch up to a reality they hadn't planned for, a reality where the target was never helpless, never random, never chosen by accident. The calm before the strike is always the part people misunderstand. They imagine chaos first, noise, panic, raised voices. They think violence announces itself. In reality, the most dangerous moment is the quiet one, when nothing seems to be happening at all. That was the moment she was in now. Still walking. Same pace. Same posture. Same expression. Anyone watching from a window would have seen nothing unusual. Just another person heading home, another uneventful night. Inside, everything was slowing down. Her thoughts didn't race. They narrowed. The world compressed into usable information. Distance, timing, surface, light. She registered the uneven pavement without looking down. She noted the car parked half on the curb and how it could block one angle but expose another. She felt the shift in the air when someone moved closer behind her. Not startled, not tense, just aware. Calm isn't the absence of danger. It's control in the presence of it. Her breathing stayed steady, low in her chest. In training, panic was treated like a failure of discipline. You learn to recognize it, isolate it, and shut it down. Heart rate up, hands steady. Adrenaline flowing, mind clear. She had practiced this state until it felt familiar, almost comforting. The calm was a signal that the body was ready, that the mind was aligned with the task ahead. The people behind her mistook that calm for ignorance. They whispered again, confidence creeping into their movements. One laughed under his breath. Another shuffled his feet, impatient. They were amped up, riding the edge of excitement, letting emotion drive them forward. Emotion makes noise. Emotion leaks into posture, into breath, into timing. She could feel it radiating off them, hot and unfocused. She didn't turn around because there was no need. Turning would have broken the calm, would have told them they mattered more than they did. Instead, she let them believe the moment belonged to them. Calm can be deceptive that way. It invites mistakes. It encourages overreach. People fill silence with action when they don't know what else to do. Her hands brushed against the seams of her jacket as she walked, not searching, just confirming range of motion. Fingers loose, wrists aligned. She ran through options without emotion, the way a checklist runs through a pilot's head before turbulence. If they rushed together, the response would be different than if they split. If one grabbed, that would dictate sequence. If a weapon appeared, priorities would shift instantly. None of it caused fear. Fear clouds judgment. Calm sharpens it. Time stretched. Each step felt deliberate, even though her pace never changed. The quiet street amplified small sounds, the scuff of shoes, a breath taken too fast, the faint click of something metallic. She logged it all without reacting. Reaction comes later. Preparation comes now. This was the window where outcomes are decided, before anyone throws a punch, before anyone shouts, before anyone realizes they're no longer in control. The calm before the strike is also the last chance for things not to happen. She knew that. Violence wasn't the goal. Resolution was. She had been trained to end situations efficiently, not dramatically, to minimize damage when possible and maximize effectiveness when necessary. The calm allowed space for that judgment. It was the line between restraint and action. They crossed that line themselves. One moved too fast, too close, invading space he hadn't earned. Another shifted position, telegraphing intent without realizing it. Their confidence was peaking, their awareness dropping. The calm held steady. No spike, no rush. Just a quiet internal acknowledgement that the moment had arrived, that the waiting was over. Her body adjusted subtly, weight distributing, center of gravity lowering by inches. Invisible changes to anyone not trained to see them. She wasn't bracing. She was aligning. The calm didn't disappear. It deepened. This was the state she had learned to trust, the one that carried her through darkness, exhaustion, uncertainty. The calm wasn't hesitation. It was commitment without emotion. In that stillness, she was already ahead of them, already moving through actions they hadn't yet forced, already occupying the seconds they were about to lose. The strike hadn't happened yet, but its shape was already defined, its path already chosen, its outcome already leaning in one direction, carried forward by silence, by patience, by the dangerous misunderstanding that calm means nothing is coming. Training over fear is not something that shows up in the moment. It's built long before the moment ever arrives. Fear is natural, automatic, wired into the body to protect it. Training is deliberate. It has to be earned, repeated, burned into muscle and bone until it overrides instinct. When the situation turns sharp, fear doesn't disappear. It gets replaced. The body still reacts, but it reacts the way it has been taught to react. She felt the surge, the familiar lift of adrenaline, the heightened awareness that makes sounds clearer and movements sharper. But it didn't control her. It never had. From the first days of training, fear was treated like raw material. Something to shape, not something to avoid. You learned to function while afraid. You learned to move accurately while your heart was pounding. You learned to think clearly when your body wanted to freeze or flee. Every repetition mattered. Every drill had a purpose. Getting knocked down and standing back up without hesitation. Performing techniques until they were automatic, even when exhausted, even when hurt. Being put under pressure again and again until pressure stopped feeling special. Training stripped away the luxury of panic. There was no room for it. If you panicked, you failed. If you failed, you repeated until you didn't. Fear lies. It tells you that you're weaker than you are, slower than you are, less capable than you are. Training exposes that lie. It replaces it with evidence. You've been here before. You've done this before. You know what comes next. Her body knew what to do even before her conscious mind finished processing the situation. Hands moved where they needed to be. Feet adjusted without thought. Balance corrected itself instinctively. The people around her were running on fear they didn't recognize. Their excitement was fear dressed up as confidence. Their aggression was fear looking for release. They were improvising, reacting in real time, hoping things would go their way. She wasn't hoping. She was executing. Training removes hope from the equation. It replaces it with probability and control. She remembered the early days, when mistakes were punished immediately. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. Instructors didn't raise their voices when you failed. They let the failure speak for itself. A missed detail, a slow reaction, a moment of hesitation. Those moments were dissected, repeated, corrected. You learned quickly that fear creates hesitation, and hesitation creates openings. Pain had been part of the process. Not glorified, not avoided, just accepted. You learned how much you could take without breaking focus. You learned that pain is information, not a command. It tells you something is happening, not what to do about it. That lesson stayed with her now. If pain came, it would be noted and ignored until the situation was resolved. Training also taught restraint. Knowing when not to act is as important as knowing how. She had been drilled to recognize thresholds. Lines that once crossed changed the response completely. Until then, control was maintained. Emotion was kept out. Fear stayed contained. Once crossed, the response became decisive, efficient, and final. The difference showed in posture, in timing, in intention. While others tensed up, telegraphing every move, her body stayed loose and responsive. Tension wastes energy. It slows reaction time. Training teaches relaxation under pressure, the ability to move fluidly instead of rigidly. She wasn't bracing for impact. She was prepared to create it. Fear makes people rush. Training teaches patience. It teaches you to wait half a second longer than the other person expects, to let them commit first, to let their mistake present itself. She watched them shift, overextend, step into disadvantage without realizing it. Each mistake was a gift they didn't know they were giving. In moments like this, training becomes identity. There's no internal debate, no second guessing. The body does what it has been taught to do because it has done it so many times before. The environment fades. Distractions fall away. There is only the task. Fear stays at the edge, acknowledged but powerless. She didn't need to prove anything. She didn't need to dominate. She needed to survive, to neutralize, to move on. Training had taught her that outcomes matter more than emotions. Control matters more than anger. Precision matters more than force. Fear might still be there, whispering in the background, but training spoke louder, clearer, and with authority earned through years of repetition, discipline, and moments that had demanded everything she had long before this night ever arrived. The last chance to walk away is rarely announced out loud. It isn't a warning shouted across a street or a dramatic pause before something explodes. It's quiet, subtle, often invisible to the people standing on the edge of it. In this moment, that chance still existed, hanging there for a few seconds longer than it needed to. She was aware of it. She always was. Situations don't turn violent all at once. They tip, slowly at first, then all at once. She kept moving forward, not because she was afraid, but because forward motion preserves options. Stopping invites confrontation. Turning invites escalation. Walking keeps the balance in a neutral state, where decisions can still be undone. Her body language said nothing, which was the point. No challenge. No submission. Just space. Space is what you give people when you're offering them a way out. The men behind her didn't understand that. They thought the lack of reaction meant permission. They mistook silence for consent to continue. That's how last chances get wasted. People don't recognize them because they expect resistance to come early. They expect fear to show itself. When it doesn't, they assume there isn't any line to cross. She was counting, not in numbers, but in signals. Distance closing too fast. Footsteps sinking instead of staggering. Voices dropping instead of fading. These were indicators, learned through repetition, reinforced by experience. Each one pushed the situation closer to the point where walking away would no longer be an option for anyone involved. The last chance isn't just for the threat. It's also for the one being threatened. It's the final moment to choose restraint over action, to let things end without force. She had been taught to respect that moment, not out of mercy, but out of discipline. Violence carries weight. Once initiated, it changes everything that follows. That weight is never ignored by people who understand it. She gave them room without giving ground. Her pace stayed steady. Her posture stayed neutral. She didn't reach for anything, didn't glance back, didn't tense. These were all signals too, though not the ones they were looking for. To someone trained, it would have been obvious. To them, it was just another missed detail. One of them laughed softly, the sound meant to test her, to see if it would crack the calm. It didn't. Sounds are cheap. Intimidation without commitment is noise. She noted it and kept walking. The chance to walk away was still there, thinning but present. They could have let the moment pass. They could have turned back, joked it off, gone home. Nothing had happened yet. The last chance is often mistaken for hesitation. People assume that if nothing has happened, nothing will. They don't understand that restraint takes more control than aggression. It takes confidence to not act when action would be easy. It takes awareness to recognize when force is unnecessary. She wasn't waiting because she was unsure. She was waiting because she was certain. Her training had drawn clear lines in her mind. Verbal escalation, positional escalation, physical contact. Each step carried consequences. They were approaching the final threshold now, the one that changes responsibility. Up to this point, they still owned their choices. Past it, outcomes would belong to her. She adjusted her path slightly, angling closer to the curb, opening space on one side while closing it on the other. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable. To them, it meant nothing. To her, it was a test. A small shift to see who would follow, who would overcommit. The last chance doesn't always look like mercy. Sometimes it looks like opportunity. They followed. That choice said everything. It confirmed intent. It removed ambiguity. The space she had offered was rejected. The exit was ignored. In that instant, the last chance expired, not with drama, not with anger, but with clarity. Her mind didn't change gears. It simply closed a door. She didn't feel disappointment. She didn't feel regret. Those emotions belong to people who doubt their judgment. What she felt was resolution. The understanding that she had done what she was trained to do. She had allowed time. She had preserved space. She had given an opening for the situation to end quietly. It didn't. Her body responded before thought could catch up, not out of impulse, but out of acceptance. The moment for walking away had passed, not because she wanted it to, but because they had chosen to move beyond it, step by step, breath by breath, until there was nothing left between intention and action but the space they had already crossed. When instinct takes over, it doesn't feel dramatic. There's no surge of emotion, no internal speech, no moment of decision announced in the mind. It's quieter than that. Cleaner. The body moves before thought tries to interfere. Years of repetition collapse into a single response, and everything unnecessary falls away. This is where training stops being something you learned and starts being something you are. Her awareness narrowed to a tight, efficient focus. The street, the houses, The night air faded into the background. What remained were bodies, spacing, movement, intent. Instinct isn't guesswork. It's recognition. The same way a seasoned driver brakes before consciously registering danger, she acted because her nervous system had seen this shape of threat before. Many times, in many forms. The first movement wasn't aggressive. It was positional, a shift of weight, a half step that changed angles and denied access. Instinct always starts with control. Control of balance. Control of distance. Control of timing. Power comes later. She didn't rush. Rushing is a conscious error. Instinct is patient without hesitation. One of them reacted late, trying to adjust to a change he hadn't noticed until it was already happening. That delay mattered. Instinct exploits delay. Hands came up not to strike, but to redirect, to break alignment, to turn forward motion into vulnerability. The body knows leverage even when the mind is silent. Bones, joints, centers of gravity respond predictably under pressure. Instinct remembers that. There was no anger in her movements. Anger makes things sloppy. It adds force where precision is needed. Her expression didn't change because expression wastes energy. Everything went inward, efficient and contained. The sounds that escaped weren't shouts or threats, just short breaths, impact against pavement, the involuntary noise bodies make when balance is taken away from them. Instinct doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't care about symmetry or restraint beyond necessity. It prioritizes safety and resolution. One threat neutralized became an obstacle, something to move past, not focus on. Her attention flowed immediately to the next movement, the next shift, the next opening. Instinct never lingers. It transitions. Someone grabbed, fingers clumsy, grip incomplete. Her body responded before pain registered, turning the contact into a lever, a mistake that folded in on itself. Pain arrived for them first, sharp and confusing. For her, it was just feedback, confirming pressure, angle, outcome. She didn't think about it. Thinking slows instinct down. This is where people who've never been trained misunderstand what they're seeing. They think it's speed. They think it's strength. It's neither. It's familiarity. The body recognizes patterns and moves through them the way water moves through cracks, following the path that requires the least resistance. Instinct isn't wild. It's economical. Her footing adjusted automatically, compensating for uneven ground without conscious correction. Peripheral vision tracked motion while her central focus stayed locked on the nearest threat. Hands returned to neutral positions the moment they were free, ready for the next contact. There was no pause to assess success. Success is irrelevant until the situation is finished. One of them hesitated, just long enough to break his own momentum. Instinct noticed. Opportunity doesn't announce itself either. It appears briefly and disappears just as fast. She moved into that space, not aggressively, but decisively, occupying it before he understood it was gone. His confusion widened the gap. Instinct widened it further. Breathing stayed steady, controlled by habit rather than effort. Oxygen fuels clarity. Panic starves it. Her body knew that without needing to be reminded. Every motion served a purpose, and when that purpose was fulfilled, the motion ended. No extra force. No wasted follow-through. Instinct also knows when to stop applying pressure and when to increase it. Resistance changed. Weight shifted. Intent wavered. Her response adapted instantly, without emotional attachment to any single action. She wasn't committed to a technique. She was committed to an outcome. The difference between instinct and impulse is discipline. Impulse seeks release. Instinct seeks resolution. One explodes outward. The other folds inward and then expands only as much as required. Watching it from the outside might have looked chaotic, but from within, it was structured, almost calm. The people involved felt overwhelmed not because of what she did, but because of how quickly control left them. Instinct doesn't give warnings. It doesn't negotiate. It simply takes advantage of what is offered, and in moments like this, mistakes are offered freely, stacked one on top of another, each one compounding the next, each one feeding into a chain of reactions that the body had already committed to before the mind ever caught up. Consequences arrive fast, but they never arrive randomly. They come from choices stacking up, one after another, until momentum takes over. By the time the men understood that something had gone wrong, the space for changing their minds was already gone. Regret doesn't slow consequences down. Confusion doesn't stop them. Once the line is crossed, events move forward with their own gravity. The first consequence was disorientation. Nothing matched their expectations anymore. The situation they thought they controlled no longer followed familiar rules. Movements they couldn't track. Reactions they couldn't predict. The body responds poorly when the mind loses its framework. Coordination breaks down. Timing collapses. Panic fills the gap where confidence used to be. Pain followed quickly, but not in a clean, cinematic way. It came unevenly, unexpectedly. A joint moved where it wasn't meant to move. Breath left a body and didn't come back right away. The kind of pain that doesn't register as injury at first, only as wrongness, as something that shouldn't be happening. Consequences don't announce themselves as punishment. They arrive as reality asserting itself. Each attempt to recover created another mistake. One tried to stand too fast, balance gone, legs not responding the way memory insisted they should. Another reached out for support and found none. Hands grasped at air, at fabric, at nothing solid. The ground became unfamiliar, unreliable. Consequences changed the environment as much as the body. She didn't chase outcomes. She let them unfold. Once control was established, she moved through it without attachment, responding only to what was still active, what still posed risk. The rest faded into irrelevance. Consequences don't require attention once they've taken hold. They propagate on their own. Shock set in, not just physical but cognitive. The realization that the story they'd been telling themselves was wrong, that they weren't predators, that they weren't in charge, that the person they targeted wasn't playing the role they'd assigned her. That kind of shock lingers longer than bruises. It disrupts identity. It forces reevaluation under stress. Sounds drew closer now. A door opening somewhere. A voice in the distance. The world, which had narrowed earlier, began to widen again. Consequences don't exist in isolation. They ripple outward, attracting attention, drawing witnesses, pulling in variables no one can control. Time speeds up when that happens. Fear finally arrived for them, late and unhelpful. Not the sharp fear that prepares the body, but the dull fear that paralyzes it. The kind that makes limbs heavy and thoughts scatter. It came too late to be useful, only early enough to be remembered. Fear at this stage doesn't inspire action. It records loss. Their breathing changed, ragged and shallow. The body trying to catch up with what had already happened. Consequences strain systems that were never prepared to handle them. Muscles tremble. Vision blurs. The nervous system floods and then stalls. Recovery becomes uncertain. She adjusted her position one last time, not aggressively, but decisively, ensuring no sudden movement would reignite the situation. Control isn't about domination. It's about preventing escalation once the outcome is clear. She didn't need to prove anything. The consequences had already spoken. The weight of the moment settled unevenly. For her, it registered as completion. For them, it lingered as disbelief. That asymmetry is part of consequence. The person who is prepared exits cleanly. The person who is not remains inside the aftermath. They would replay it later, trying to identify the exact second where things shifted. They would argue about what went wrong, whose idea it was, who moved first. Consequences create questions that don't have satisfying answers. The truth is usually simpler than people want to accept. She stepped away as attention shifted, blending back into the ordinary world that had never felt threatened to her. The street returned to what it had been minutes earlier. Houses quiet. Lights steady. The environment indifferent. Consequences don't mark places. They mark people. What remained behind her was a lesson delivered without words, without warnings, without mercy or cruelty. Just cause and effect moving at full speed, carried forward by choices made under false assumptions, ending exactly where those assumptions inevitably lead.